I feel like questions of whether or not a Disney-owned property actually delivered on any kind of LGBTQ plus representation has come up before in the not so recent. Oh boy. Hey folks, this is the other follow-up that I wanted to do on Loki, now that season 1 has wrapped up. This one's way less spoilery than the one I did back on Wednesday, talking about, well, implications of what happened in the finale. I'm not going to promise no spoilers on this, but spoilers are not the point, because I'm talking about something that was revealed a couple episodes in and was core to the show, and pretty much everyone knows about it at this point. And that is Sylvie, primarily, and also LGBTQ plus representation in the show in general. Did it promise us anything ahead of time? Did it deliver on those promises? Did it deliver something else? Did it deliver at all? Well, let's take a look at this. And this is kind of important for me to do because I unabashedly loved Loki. I thought it was excellent. I was enjoying it all the way up through the finale, but I knew the finale was really going to make or break this thing, and I loved the finale. So I really like this show. But liking something is not a reason to give it a pass on issues that I care about and have brought up before, and specifically brought up before in regards to Disney. So yeah, let's take a look at this. First things first. Was there anything that could be considered a promise made ahead of time? Now, this is actually kind of important because this is part of the pattern for Disney up to this point. Prior to the release of the live-action Beauty and the Beast, we were told by the director, Bill Condon, that there would be an exclusively gay moment for the character of LeFou. Let's set aside the fact that the only queer representation you felt like putting in there was a character whose name literally translates to the Fool and is the villain's henchman and lackey, but also the supposed exclusively gay moment is basically blinking you'll miss it, not a confirmation, and anyone who wishes to ignore it easily can do so. More recently, we had Solo, a Star Wars story, where one of the writers said that there was a fluidity to Lando Calrissian's sexuality that would be evident in the film. And it wasn't. It was kind of hinted at that maybe he had a thing going with his droid. Except, A, I don't really buy it because really the only direct source on that is the droid herself.
I'm sure you've noticed that Lando has feelings for me, which makes working together difficult because I do not feel the same way about him.
Yes. Yeah, I see that.
And B, even if that is to be the case, the droid is distinctly coded feminine. So even there, it's arguably a species leap, not actually a gender leap in terms of any kind of depiction of pansexuality, bisexuality, or anything of that nature. So again, talked up ahead of time, did not deliver. So did Loki promise anything ahead of time? It kind of did. So in the lead up, we got this image. And I actually talked about this in a video over on the Break Room of Geeks. Subscribe to that channel if you haven't already. But this listing, sex, fluid, I took note. A lot of people took note of that because this is something that up to this point, honestly, Disney had kind of gotten a pass on. Because sexual and gender fluidity of Loki is, well, first of all, it's a thing tied to the character all the way back to Norse mythology, so it's not invented by SJWs. Secondly, it has been an increasingly core component to the character as depicted in the comics. Now, the thing is, nobody was really holding Disney's feet to the fire over this up until this point, because Disney and Marvel, when they make these into films or TV shows, do not bring in every single thing from the comics. They don't have the time, the space, nor the obligation to do so. They cherry pick what's going to work and they work with that. So pretty much, especially at this point, it's accepted that they're going to present us with a version of these characters that will not necessarily include every single aspect of it ever seen. Would it have been nice to have seen queer or gender or sexual fluidity to Loki prior to the show? Well, yeah, absolutely. I at least, speaking for myself, not really speaking for the community, but I didn't see calls for it, and I certainly wasn't calling for them to do that. So when I saw that image, you'd think I would get excited. I didn't. I got nervous. So I didn't have expectations before. Now I do. Now you can disappoint me. Like you've done before. Repeatedly. So that brings us to the subject of Sylvie, the female Loki variant. So the question becomes, is this LGBTQ plus representation? Is Loki depicted as a character as being sexually or gender fluid? Is Sylvie a trans character? How exactly does this work? And unfortunately, it kind of falls short by that measure. Because at this point, what it appears to be is that dossier was not specific to the Loki that we knew. That was the main character played by Tom Hiddleston. It appeared to be a bit more of a dossier on Lokis as a concept because we saw many variants of Lokis. And since the Time Variance Authority, the TVA, had been tracking down and trying to capture Sylvie, a Loki variant, for some time, and they would have known she was a woman, when classifying Lokis as a whole, sex fluid, meaning could be a number of things, was something that would make sense when looking at the big picture, if not necessarily a specific instance. Because there's no indication of a fluid sex or gender to Tom Hiddleston's Loki. None whatsoever. We do have a confirmation of bisexuality, which I'll kind of pause the rest of this and address really quickly. I thought that was done quite nicely.
You're a prince. Must have been would-be princesses. Or perhaps another prince.
A bit of both.
I think normally I might be a little bit more critical of a depiction and a confirmation of someone's sexuality in a more sort of casual, just dropped in their line, something that could easily be cut, distributing it to foreign markets. Like, don't get me wrong, I still appreciate more than nothing. And normally I'd be a little bit more critical of that. I'm not too much here, partially because Loki as a character, while exuding a lot of, I don't mean to sexualize an actor I don't know, but a lot of sexual energy in the performance, didn't really have romantic or sexual plot lines. So it didn't bother me so much that the confirmation of Loki, the one we know, being bisexual, just getting this little line, quick exchange, really just one line confirming. I was more okay with that because that entire element of his character at all hadn't really gotten screen time anyway. So it's not like we'd gotten a ton of time with him talking about being with women or us watching him be with women, and then this comparatively gets way less attention. At the time it was said, that's honestly probably the most attention Loki's sexuality had gotten at all. Now, you could make the argument that it gets undermined somewhat given what appears to be the romantic entanglement between him and Sylvie. I don't really want to get into the weeds on that. I know some people found it unsettling or disturbing because even though this is technically not a blood relative and being a variant, it makes it weird. But some people just get squidged out by self-cessed. Like, it can feel weird and ping emotions or triggers or just make you feel like, oh, that doesn't seem right. And even though the narrative is constructed in a way in that it's not actually an incestuous act from a technical definition, I get why that bothers some people. I didn't like it just because I don't like romantic subplots for lead characters. I almost never do. So that was why I didn't like it. But I do want to move on from that. So coming back to sex fluid or gender fluid. See, I'm going to say gender fluid because even though the show had it listed sex fluid isn't really a thing in real life. Not with humans, anyways. There are other species that are actually able to change their sex. But gender fluidity is a thing that exists amongst human beings. Hi, gender fluidity is a thing. Sex fluidity isn't. And so one could maybe try and make the argument that, well, no, the show didn't actually promise anything because what it listed, the idea of sex being fluid, that's not actually a thing. So, did they really make a promise? Well, they kind of did. Because while sex fluid isn't a thing, it is analogous and linked to gender fluidity, which is a thing. And the thing is, even going by sex fluid, I don't really think they delivered on that. They only delivered it from the one perspective of looking at Loki as an event across all of these varying timelines. But as an individual, no. Because I want to circle back onto Sylvie for a couple of reasons. First is, she is the only female variant we see, and there is active dialogue within the show to indicate that she may well be the only female Loki variant.
Have any of you met a woman variant of us?
Sounds terrifying.
Oh, she is.
With that in mind, one has to ask, does that make her a trans character? Well, as yet, we have no confirmation of that. Might it get confirmed and or explored in a second season? Maybe. I'm not going to give it a pass, though, because a bit like, and I hate that I keep coming back to this franchise as a point of reference, but it's helpful regardless. Much like when Dumbledore appeared in Fantastic Beasts 2, Crimes of Grindelwald, the fact that J.K. Rowling claims he's gay was not in evidence in that film. And even before I completely wrote off the Harry Potter franchise and its creator, I did say, look, it's possible that they are going to deal with that again later. But I also said there's no way it won't look like a correction because there was no reason to not confirm it here. If you were always planning to do it and eventually actually address it, why wouldn't you address it at least somewhat here where it first comes up so that it looks like you know what you're doing as opposed to trying to fix a missed opportunity, or you were just dipping your toes and going, are people going to be okay with that? And then waiting for confirmation before going ahead and doing it. And it's a similar situation here. If we get into season 2 of Loki and we get a confirmation that Sylvie is in fact a trans character, and I'll address to what extent she is or isn't, because right now it's actually still open-ended. I'll come back to that. But if we get a confirmation next season that she is, I will appreciate that, but it won't fix the fact that it wasn't confirmed in the first season when there was no reason for it to not be. So it will still feel like a correction or a retcon or they didn't have the nerve to deliver the first time. So as the question of whether or not Sylvie is trans, first, as I said, it is noted that she does appear to be the only female variant. Now, that might indicate transness because otherwise it seems to be a bit of a 1 in a million situation because there's all these Lokis and only one woman. Wouldn't it almost be more likely that Loki is always male at birth, but then this Loki became female? Another thing that would line up with that is Sylvie's rejection of the name Loki.
Loki.
Ugh, don't call me that.
Don't call me variant.
I'm sorry about not calling some faded photocopy of me Loki.
Good, because that's not who I am anymore. I'm Sylvie now.
She doesn't use the term dead name, but she does kind of react to it in that manner. It's coded that way. But at the same time, even though I said, well, only one female in all these many, that seems odd. We also had an alligator that was a Loki. Although, fair is fair, they did at least plant the possibility that it's not actually a Loki.
And who's to say he's even a Loki variant? He's green, isn't he?
There's also the line from Sylvie where she says,
The universe wants to break free, so it manifests chaos. Like me being born the goddess of mischief.
Now, some have taken that to mean that she was in fact born female. But it's important to keep in mind that for many trans people, not all, but many trans people, they knew from a very early point in their lives that they were always the gender that they are, the gender that they transitioned to. So in the case of trans women, they always knew that they were a woman. And some will even say, I was born a woman. Into the wrong body, possibly, but still born a woman. So that phrase itself does not necessarily invalidate the possibility that Sylvie is trans and was born male. It does, however, muddy the waters. And it feels like the show at this point, in terms of that question, has just decided to not commit. It won't pick a side and draw a line in the sand and go, this is what we're doing. It seems to be riding the line. And I feel like it knows it's doing that, because that image of the dossier with the sex fluid, I was dead certain when that first came out that that was going to turn out to be a marketing-only image. And it was never going to appear in the show. But it did. Which means somewhere in the course of the show, these possibilities, these options occurred to somebody. But they decided to not deal with it yet. Which does feel a bit like a broken promise. It does feel like, well, look, you brought this up as a possibility. You decided to start exploring this. And you are the ones who have decided to avoid the question of whether Sylvie was always female from a physical, biological standpoint, or is in fact a trans woman. And there was a point in my past where I might have said, no, you know what? It's okay. She's interpretable as that. I can work with that. I'm not there anymore. If she is, I want it said. And if she's not, I don't want it hinted that she might be. I want characters to be what they are. Not be this weird middling trying to appeal or be coded in a way to appeal to LGBTQ plus people, but not confirmed so that we don't alienate the mainstream. Either do it or don't. Because the days for hinting, the days for open-ended, interpretable representation, they're gone. We need to move past that. And I do feel in a lot of ways that's what Sylvie is right now. Is that what she was intended to be? Maybe not. Maybe in the writer's room, they genuinely thought from the beginning, we will deal with this in a second season. And part of how we want to do that story means it's better for us to reveal it later. Maybe that's the conversation that happened, but I don't know. For all I know, that is just as likely as they sat down and went, ooh, you know, that'd be a really interesting thing, but I'm not sure that people will take to it. Let's hint at it, see what people say, and then maybe later we'll do it. They're equally as likely. I can speculate all day long, but I can't know the minds of the creators, the writers. I can only express my frustration. Now, you may notice, given how I tend to address these kinds of topics, this isn't a shouting frustration. So this is hardly the harshest I've ever been to Disney in particular. But I'm getting real tired of having representation dangled in front of me and either not delivered or delivered in roundabout, deniable ways. Just give it. If you're going to give it, give it. And if you're not, stop. I hope that they confirm Sylvie is trans next season. Because I think that's a more interesting story to tell in terms of her life and what her variance was. And it has the potential to speak to a lot of trans people because a lot of us feel that we are persecuted for being who we actually are. And if the idea that a Loki was trans, identified and started to live as a woman, and that was their nexus event, that was what made them a variant, there's a lot of very potent storytelling to be done with that at its core that is analogous and relatable to real world trans and LGBTQ plus issues. And I hope that is an opportunity that is not left to die on the vine. But we'll see. I'm a bit disappointed, but we will see. What are your thoughts on Loki, the show, in terms of LGBTQ plus representation, Sylvie in specific? Did I expect too much? Did they actually issue a promise? Do you think I went too gentle on them? Whatever your thoughts are, politely leave them down in the comments and let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. All that helps me out. I have a Patreon. That is how I pay my bills. Any amount you are able to give me there helps. There's also YouTube memberships if you want to help me out that way. Rewards for every tier of support. But even if you're not able to do that, don't sweat it. Because at the end of the day, what I want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.